Hi everyone, and welcome to the Scorpio August 2021 self-connection reading. This is I Am Illuminated Tarot and meaning-based spiritual coaching services. I am Lauren. Hi and welcome. So this is one of 3 connection readings I complete for each sign each month that focuses on bringing awareness to your unique, internal, singular, authentic self, and how that connects to your external environment as well as to others. So I start the month off with the self-connection reading because we really need to bring awareness to the self first, so that then as we progress through the month and the readings, we can start to understand how this part of ourself that we are looking to unlock and bring awareness to in this reading then is meant to come out and connect both to your external environment and then eventually with the energy of love, which is what we talk about in the last reading of the month, where we look at the general energies of love and romantic love, and we kind of tie up the whole month as a holistic whole for a awareness of self. And all of this is in the vein, basically, of trying to get you to be able to understand your singular importance and be able to see its place and purpose in the world, in the greater collective experience, so that you can really feel and tap into that level of emotional fulfillment and happiness that comes with knowing who you are and where you belong. All right, Scorpio. So all of my readings focus on utilizing 3 basic principles of curiosity, courage, and contemplation. And this is what I call the Triad of Engagement, which is a coaching tool I have developed in my coaching practice to really help use 3 very simple principles to show how we can utilize them on a day-to-day basis to unlock that awareness about ourselves, and then also to unlock that awareness about how we connect to the greater collective experience. All right, so I'm going to pull a Power of Surrender card to start the reading off. This is going to help us focus on the aspect of curiosity. And curiosity is where we get to open ourselves up and become receptive to our environment. Now, normally we project curiosity outwards, but in this reading, because it's a self-connection reading, we are shining that beautiful light of curiosity and we're shining it inwards towards ourselves. So we are going to be looking at trying to break through any of those barriers that we create as we move from childhood into adulthood that prevent us from being able to utilize curiosity to its fullest extent, meaning any area where we stop being curious. And when we're thinking about ourselves, this can look like where we start to use the phrase, well, this is just who I am and I can't change. This is just the way it always is, or I can't share this part of myself because it always ends up with a negative response. Or I don't want to look at that part of myself because it's scary. And this is where we then have to step into the positive elements of curiosity, which are optimism and openness and receptivity. So instead of saying, I don't want to see that, we're saying, you know what? I'm ready to take a new look in this area from an optimistic perspective. And this is where we get a chance to really tap into the awe and wonder of our entire life experience, because we get a chance to understand that we will never know everything about everything, including ourselves. It's a journey to continue to unlock parts of ourselves. And that's really why we have to stay engaged, because as we're engaged and aware, that's when we start to understand, oh, this part of myself, maybe I wasn't quite sure how to work with it, but now I'm starting to see, and it's time for me to bring this out. So we're never getting stuck in a place of emotional or spiritual stagnation. We're growing continually as we move forward. Okay, now curiosity is going to involve a question. So as we move into the month of August, Scorpio, we are going to build a question around the themes of this card. So we have surrender comparisons with other people. And it says, keep your eyes trained on yourself. Focus on your own strengths, attractiveness, and power. And I love the image on this card. It's this really dynamic, it looks like a native individual, but there's this component to it of looking up beyond yourself. When we're thinking about our connection to ourself, we are also talking about our connection to the divine through the self. Because we are all meant to be this singular individual, but connected through the divine. And that's how we discover where our purpose is in our external environment. Because we're all a piece of the greater whole. So as we move into the month of August, the question I would like you guys to start asking yourself and to keep in mind as you move through the month is, where are you limiting yourself? Limiting the expression of your authentic, unique individual self because you are comparing yourself to others. Now, it's hard to not compare yourself. I mean, we do as human beings need some type of what I would call context or frame of reference as we learn and grow. But we also have a culture, especially I am coming from America, we have a culture that really has been focused very much so on comparison to others. If you think about this might have even started when we go back almost 70 years to the 50s and 60s, where we were really pushed to kind of compare ourselves to our neighbors. What do our neighbors have? They have the new car. Well, I want, the newer car. And they have the bigger house and the 2.5 kids. Well, I want a house that's even bigger than theirs, and I want to have 2.5 kids, but with the dog thrown in there. So there's this component of, I think, between now the addition of social media, but also the kind of consumer-driven culture we've been living in for quite some time, there is this element of we've been pushed to compare ourselves, pushed to be in a place of almost competition with others. And you can't be in competition in the areas of emotional and spiritual growth. Now, in physical growth and in mental growth, there is a component that is a little bit different. So again, these are the four aspects of self: our physical, our mental, our emotional, and then our spiritual. And when we're thinking of our physical and our mental, now yes, these are areas where you can push yourself to overdevelop them or to be competitive. People can sit there and become weightlifters, or as we're watching the Olympics that are going on right now as I film this, there's this quality of being able to push your body on a physical level to, not only compare to others, but then to surpass them. Same with on a mental level. We can study and take in knowledge and be able to perform better on tests than another. So there's this element of competition there, but on an emotional level and on a spiritual level, there really is no element of competition, because that's where we get to tap into our uniqueness. That's where we get to tap into our connection to the divine and our unique connection and place to fill in the external collective environment. And you can't be in competition with somebody else's purpose, if that makes sense. You also can't be in competition on an emotional level with what provides you emotional fulfillment, because what provides you with emotional fulfillment is completely different than every other person you are going to meet around you. And this is where I often speak of one person's heaven is another person's hell, so to speak, because we all have our own unique singular perspective. We all have our own unique singular needs and wants and hopes and dreams and abilities, and all of that creates our singularity. And so even though you might align with somebody else's perspective to a certain extent, and you're like, wow, we can both dream about what if the world looked like this, or what if it felt like this, what you're actually imagining in your head and feeling into is very different than the person sitting next to you. And that's just a reality. And so again, we can't be competitive in trying to find emotional fulfillment through something that's bringing emotional fulfillment to somebody else. We have to seek and find that from ourselves, from within. And so that's really where I'm feeling for you guys. That's the big lesson of this month, is to realize that there is no competition on the spiritual and emotional plane. And once you realize that, that's a very freeing concept. There is this quality to that realization and that opening up to that realization. So when we're thinking about being curious, we are opening ourselves up, being receptive. And when we're receptive to that concept of, well, only I can find emotional fulfillment from meeting my own needs, from expressing what I specifically need to express, from growing my own specific dream. And I have my own specific place and purpose that is very different. Now, when we think about fulfilling a place and purpose, now there are many people who could be in the same industry, fulfilling the same role, so to speak. You could be a doctor in a hospital where there are many other doctors who do very similar work to you. But you yourself will bring something unique and special to that experience. So maybe you are a doctor, but maybe you have a very specific niche of expertise. Or maybe it's your personality and your experience that you bring through into every patient-doctor interaction. And you bring this extra level of insight and engagement that another doctor may not be able to provide, because that's not within their wheelhouse to do. But they might be more of the devil in the details. It's kind of more of like, for anybody who's watched the TV show House, a little bit more like that. No bedside manner, but all detail, and can pick out, these random little connected dots that somebody else might not be able to connect. But you're all bedside manner, which is needed at specific times. So again, this is how we fill specific roles to us, but really can't compare ourselves either, because those two different doctors are equally important, but bring a very different service to the collective experience. So this is a big freeing learning lesson this month for you Scorpios, is surrender your comparisons. If a lot of times comparisons come from judgments from others that we respect, meaning this can be us trying to compare ourselves to others because we want to meet let's say our parents. We really respect our parents, and our parents have a very specific view of how our life should turn out, or what they consider a successful life to look like. And so you try to compare yourself, you and your experience and what you're creating and achieving, and you try to compare that to their vision. And that's where we can get ourselves into problems, because again, they're coming from their own perspective of what emotionally fulfills them and what they would hope and dream and love to have, and think that everybody needs to have that. And in reality, that might not work for you at all. Now, it doesn't mean that their perspective is invalid. It just simply means that that's their perspective, and you don't have to push yourself to meet that or compare yourself to that, or hold yourself back from authentically living as yourself because you're trying to meet this unrealistic expectation and comparison. And I think somewhere inside of us, there's this person, this beautiful, strange, interesting, unique spirit living within each one of us. And we have to honor that. Very great opening question for this month. And again, there is liberation with that. There's liberation in the realization of, well, I can't compare myself to the Joneses down the street, because the Joneses down the street are different people from me on a completely different spiritual path. And that's it. It can literally be as easy as that. And I think a good example actually, as I was bringing up the Olympics, if anybody has been tracking that, and especially gymnastics with Simone Biles and her making that decision to step back and out of competition for a while, that was her honoring her own emotional needs, her own spiritual growth. And there's a quality to that where many might not understand that. And, when I'm looking at, we live in a culture where we're so focused on revering the hero, and the hero always rises to the occasion. And when the going gets tough, you should rise instead of the tough get going, so to speak. But in reality, she really showed the perfect example of this. Of at any given moment, you're living your own experience. And by tapping into what feels through emotions, what feels authentic to you, that also feeds your spiritual growth. Because then it allows you to tap in and to really become aware of, well, why am I feeling this way? And why do I feel the need to express myself this way or take action in this way? And that gets you to really contemplate and bring curiosity towards yourself to say, what am I going through right now? What do I need to address with myself? And that ends up allowing you to then address elements in your mental state, address elements in your physical state as well. So by connecting through your emotional state, you get a chance to be able to integrate and open up to your entire experiential state, if that makes sense. So, Scorpio, now we're going to move into the concept of courage. We're going to pull a spirit animal oracle card here. And courage is the next step in the process, because once we start to use curiosity to be that key to unlock our openness to something that we don't know, to help go bridge that block that's preventing us from really bringing out some aspect of ourselves and allowing us to live authentically. We then move into courage, where courage is all about bringing us into the seat of our own personal power. And this is where we get a chance to step into the power to make the decisions, to take action from an empowered place of authenticity. So courage entails the courage to make the hard decision to act on our own behalf. And when we are thinking about the example of Simone Biles, that's exactly what she did. She had to step into a place of courage to be able to be aware enough to say, I'm going to take this action. And I'm going to ask myself, why am I taking this action? And I'm going to help answer it through taking the action and seeing what happens. But I'm not going to let somebody prevent me or stop me. I'm not, whether it's through comparison or just our own thoughts telling us we can't do it. I'm not going to stop myself from stepping into that place of courage to take action. I'm going to do it, and then I will deal with the consequences, which is the next step, contemplation. So we have here for the element of courage and action, we have wombat spirit. And it says, be at home, number 68. And the number 68 reduces to the number 14, which then reduces further to the number 5. Now the number 14 is a number that I see as a number of liberation. So there is this theme, Scorpio, and it's kind of been coming through in all of your readings. This is theme of liberation, of almost like shaking off that chain of the chain basically of your comparison to others. That there's this element of the universe pushing you to see your uniqueness and to say, stop it. Stop comparing yourself, stop holding yourself back, It's time for you to focus on you, because whatever is going to be coming out of you, it needs to be truly from a place of individuality. And you don't have to keep holding yourself back. You don't have to keep limiting yourself. It's time to be free. And that number 14 really symbolizes that. Now, the number 14 then reduces further to the number 5. The number 5 is a number of change. It's a number of breaking stuff down to be able to create something new. It can also be the number that kind of denotes chaos because of that. But the beauty of the number 5 is that it really does denote change. And so that freedom that kind of comes through with the number 14, it comes through change. And that can be change in perspective. That can be change in your complete environment, change on an emotional or mental level. But it's freedom through change. And I think that's what you're kind of being asked here is, in addition to that, to be at home. Be at home with yourself. This message is coming through very clearly to me, Scorpio, that you're being told to accept who you are and to release all attachments to what you feel you might have to box yourself into, or also where you might be comparing yourself to others and not be giving yourself the credit of how much you've achieved for yourself and achieved for yourself and your own path. And it might not, again, be living up to somebody else's standards, but now this is a great month to really tap into that self-awareness of, okay, well, what have I achieved for myself? What does emotionally fulfill me out of what I've achieved so far? And actually, what am I really building? Where is my path going? Because other people outside of ourselves can't show us our path. Can't tell us this is the path, because that's coming from their own perspective. So even in my coaching, this is not about me telling you where you need to take the next step as far as you should be in this place and you should be doing this. It's about allowing you to have the awareness of what feels right as the next step for you. When you think about what you uniquely envision for yourself, if there was nobody else in the world and you had all the money in the world and all the resources, what would you build for yourself and what would that look like? And start to tap into that on an emotional level. Now, granted, we can't all be living in some, castle in some foreign land with unicorns and you name it. But there is a quality to every one of our daydreams, every one of our fantasies, because again, those fantasies are unique to us, that there's an element of truth, an element of desire coming from us, that we want to build towards something that we emotionally connect to in those fantasies. And so this is really kind of about you getting back to that and accepting yourself fully. So when we're talking about courage and taking action, be at home with yourself. When you are presented with two options to make a decision to do this or to do that, this is when you have to come back to yourself and kind of do what Simone Biles did, which is, what works for me? What feels emotionally fulfilling for me in this moment? Not for somebody else, but for me. Because that's really what's going to start unlocking. There is something about you, obviously that's what this reading is about, but there's something about you this month that perhaps maybe you've been sitting with and it's been bothering you and you want to let it out. But you're too afraid because you're comparing yourself, or it's not in alignment with what you feel you should be bringing out and exposing. Or there's this quality here of just simply feeling like you're kind of a fish out of water, that you don't really fit in. And this can look like feeling like you're the odd man out in your family, or feeling like you're in a job, but you just can't quite click with feeling like this is the job for you. Maybe you've made a move recently, or you've tried to work your way into a new position. It just feels like this just isn't me. Well, now is the time to go within to really start to unravel, well, why do you feel that way? And in reality, what is that causing you? Every time we say no to something, we're saying yes to something else. And every time we say yes to something, we're saying no to something else. So if you're saying no to feeling secure and accepted in your family environment, meaning that you don't feel like you really belong or that you're meeting their standards, well then in saying no to that, you're saying yes to yourself. Well, what is different? What is the disconnect? What are you not able to meet or feel that you're not able, like why do you feel you don't belong? And why do you feel like you can't just be home in yourself with them? And that's what's really going to start to bring up and unlock, well, there's some aspect of self you've been hiding. Or there's some aspect of self that you just feel is not something that is appreciated by that environment. Same within the work world. If you're in a job and it just doesn't seem to be clicking, well, why? Why do you feel like why do you feel you're not at home? And when you start to think like that, that's when you can start to take those aware actions. That's when you can start to realize, well, it's maybe because I don't actually like what I do. When I say it's not within my wheelhouse to, maybe your job is a job where you have to manage people, but you have to kind of lay down the letter of the law, so to speak. And maybe that's not within your wheelhouse. Maybe you're not that type of person and you have to push yourself so far outside of your comfort zone every day to kind of be this tough person, when in reality, you'd rather be the person who capitalizes on your strong ability, interpersonal connection, to be that kind of more, I'd say, positive, upbeat, go team go kind of person. And this is when you realize, okay, well, if this feels so fish out of water to me, even though I know that this is getting me on my career track to this next level and I've been working at this for so long and blah, 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 now it's that moment to sit there and say, well, actually, when I think about being at home with myself, this job doesn't resonate with who I am, with that unique part of myself that would make me feel comfortable and at home in this job. And that's, with that awareness, that's when you can start then taking the small actions to make changes. Whether you speak with your boss, and again, every one of these actions are going to take courage because they're going to create change. You might speak to your boss and say, I took this position. It's just not feeling right for me. It's not playing to my strengths. I think my strengths are such, and is there another position that I could move into? Or realizing that if maybe after having that conversation, there is no way for you to change. And so then maybe now it's time to start putting out your resume to see, okay, I'm going to focus on a job that brings out and plays to this stronger part of myself, the part that makes me feel like I'm truly at home as myself, instead of trying to force myself into this wheelhouse over here just because I've been told that this is a great opportunity and that this is the way you get to the next level, whatever. All right. So, Scorpio, we are going to then move into your final card here, which is for contemplation. And contemplation is where we get a chance to review the consequences of our actions that we took. So contemplation. Contemplation is where we get to reflect, integrate, learn. This is our seat of responsibility to seeing seeing the consequences of our actions, and then continuing to learn and integrate those lessons that we see from the consequences. So for a point of contemplation, let's see here. What do we have for our Scorpios for the month of August? You know, Scorpios, wow, my card just shot out. For the month of August, when I was stepping into your energy and just thinking about, as I was shuffling the cards, something kind of interesting came to mind. And I wasn't even sure if I was going to share it, but I kind of feel like now I see where this ties in. I saw and heard, so I saw a bunch of clowns. And I heard, I'm not a clown. I'm not a clown. And it was very strange because it was very clear. And there's this feeling now that I'm getting from this that perhaps, you know, when you think about it and you look at this image of this person, somebody could see somebody dressed like this and think, what a clown, or what a crazy person. Like if you just went outside onto the street and you saw your neighbor walking down with this incredibly beautiful but avant-garde, multicolored feathered headdress, you'd probably look over and be like, what the H? And maybe Scorpio, you guys have been judgmental of others to see them as the clown, and you hold that judgment to yourself. And there's a part of yourself that you feel is kind of like this, is the clown, but you want to let that part of yourself out. But because you've been so judgmental towards others, perhaps there's this quality of you turning that same harsh energy towards yourself. So it's something to be cautious of. Now, I think we're all guilty of that at some point. You know, where we judge another and then we hold that judgment against ourselves as well. And there could be this quality of perhaps you feeling like there's some part of yourself that is kind of strange and out there and clown-like, and you don't want to bring it out because you might get the same judgment that you yourself would perceive that. And so I think there's this element of being able to free yourself from that kind of judgmental cycle, judgmental perspective of judging others and therein turning that judgment inward. It's kind of about releasing totally and allowing everybody to be in their own spiritual path. You get to be on your path and they get to be on their path. And at the same time, though, you also get a chance to, again, elevate each other collectively by focusing on yourself, by just being you. And so I think, Scorpio, this month is really about really focusing inward, releasing outward judgment as much as inward judgment. And then for your final point of contemplation, we have play. And it says, have fun, celebrate, don't be so serious. And I think that kind of ties in with this clown element of like, just go out there and let your freak flag fly, if I can say that 5 times fast. There is this element of stepping into who you are and almost like just taking the blinders off completely and starting to change your perspective. And this is really where internal spiritual and emotional change can happen, where when we work with the number of energy of 5 and the energy of change, it isn't about trying to change our external environment or the people around us, because that's not possible. We can't control or change what's outside of ourselves, but we can control and change ourselves. We can control the actions we choose to take. We can control the perspective we choose to see from, and we can control the actions or the reactions as well from our own reactions to the actions of others. So there is this quality here of it's time to just through a change in your perspective to realize the beauty that lies in everybody else and hold that as the judgment you bring to yourself. That if everybody else is allowed to be their beautiful freak self and the clown, well, you can be the clown as well. And even if somebody else might walk by and judge you, well, that's has nothing to do with your feeling of emotional fulfillment and you fulfilling your own spiritual path. That's just them kind of falling into the same pattern I think a lot of you have been in for some time, which is I'm going to judge everybody else and then I'm going to be self-critical of myself as well at the same time. And now what you're being asked to do is to just let that go. Be who you want to be, because the more that you are who you want to be, who you are meant to be, the more you're going to feel at home with yourself, but the more you're also going to start to uncover, again, your place, where your strengths are meant to fulfill a niche. And in doing so, where you're meant to really help elevate that element of the collective experience. That's how we feel place and purpose, instead of just working at a random job and feeling frustrated every day, or coming home to a home life that we're telling ourselves doesn't meet up with somebody else's idealistic version of the perfect home life. But in reality, it feels good to us. But yet we're not allowing ourselves to enjoy it. So these are the aspects of when you finally free yourself from, and I think a lot of us do this out of, we mix up helping and being a part of the collective experience through being our own just unique, authentic self and living in alignment with self, with needing to force ourselves to meet some level of societal expectation. That, well, I can only be of service if I meet this, or I achieve this, or I do this, or act like this. And in reality, that's not the case. It's actually just in you living as your authentic self and letting, because to be perfectly honest, there are so many people that live in fear of allowing themselves to be seen. That there are some people that if they saw somebody walking down the street with this beautiful ruffled headdress would go, oh my gosh, that person just was walking down the street with a headdress that I've been hiding in my closet this whole time. And I think I'm going to be brave enough to put it on and go walk outside too. Like, that was really cool to see somebody do that. And that's the power of just being you, that you get to unlock and open up for others that part that you were meant to fulfill, and that also they might be, when we think about ourselves as a puzzle piece, when we start to find and fulfill our specific unique place, well, then another can see where their unique piece fits next to us. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's where I fit. With that person who also wears their crazy, super amazing headdress. And I know it sounds so silly as an example, but it can really be that simple. I mean, there are times in my life where I've just been out someplace in public and I've seen somebody wearing something like that, wearing some really interesting outfit and being like, oh my gosh, I have that like strange, I don't know, piece of jewelry and I've been sitting on it and I've been too afraid to wear it. And suddenly I'm like, now I see how to wear it. Now I see, what you can do with it. Or being out somewhere and somebody, is showing off their amazing creative collection of whatever it is. And you're like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. That's incredible that somebody had the idea to create and now is not afraid to share this, because now I get a chance to enjoy this and it makes me want to go back, and I'm going to go back and look at the random junk in my own house and think, well, how can I put this together in the same way that they did? So that's really where we get a chance to realize that sometimes we are so afraid of being judged, but in reality, the more we act in accordance with ourselves, the more we find our place. And the more others who are also meant to fit around us are able then to see, that's the person I want to be around. Or that's how the kind of job I want to have, or that's how I would love to be able to wake up in the morning and have my routine. That's why things like YouTube and social media really have taken off to a certain extent, because people love to be able to see other people doing things that free them to do the same. All right, Scorpio, I hope this has been an awesome reading. So I think in just play, in contemplation, when we think about that, how can you just come out and release? Release judgment on others as much as you're releasing judgment on yourself. And that can be simply too, and when we think about taking authentic action and we start to work with changing our own internal perspective, that can be you simply being aware and conscious of every time you judge somebody else harshly, to stop and say, I'm actually going to take a look at that person and see what makes them beautiful and unique instead. So you're looking at somebody who's walking down the street dressed like a clown and you're like, what a clown. What's going on there? But then you can stop and say, well, wait a second, that person took a lot of time and energy to make that costume. I'm going to actually engage in it. And do they sew that costume? That's incredible. I've always wanted to learn how to sew. Maybe I'll ask them to teach me, or to tell me where they learned originally. Or they'll have some amazing makeup on and you're like, oh my gosh, that person's ability to utilize makeup and to do this, that's incredible. They should be somebody doing special effects for the movie industry. This is when you start to look at others like that and you start to pick out those things that, instead of making them seem just strange to you, actually make you realize the beauty in their individuality. That's when you start to then bring that back to yourself, to realize, well, I've never been good at sewing, but man, I am really good at cooking. And I need to stop being so judgmental of myself and my cooking. And I need to start, letting people come over and for me to cook great meals for them, or I'm going to go give a box of my, favorite cookies to all my neighbors because I want them to share in my experience in my love of baking. It's these elements that we get a chance to tap into some aspect of ourself through appreciation of individuality in another. We get to appreciate it within ourselves as well. All right, Scorpios, this month, go out and have fun. Be a clown. Wear your beautiful feathered headdress and see where the month takes you. Because the more that you, again, act in alignment with yourself, the more you draw in opportunities and people to you that will support you and continue to actually illuminate your path and purpose forward. All right, Scorpios, have a wonderful month of August. I hope you get a chance to check out your spiritual connection reading next week and your love connection the following week. Bye.